Is this the greatest Pixel of all time? It looked unique, packed in some great software features, had front-firing speakers and an orange power button. In this second episode of Golden Era, let's talk about that. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas, and the Pixel 2 XL holds a special place in the hearts of many Android fans for more reasons than you might take looking at the spec sheets or even just seeing photos or videos of the phone. It had big shoes to fill after the unanimously praised script flip that was the debut Pixel with its software-first direction. Critics loved its performance, voice assistant, and most notably its camera performance, taking the crown for smartphone shooters at that time. When Google's initial Pixel ad launched, it poked fun at other brands for removing the headphone port. Yet the Pixel successor lacked any kind of physical analog audio connection, so there was already a sense of change for what Google visioned the Pixel to be. The 2 XL had a lot more going on from a physical point of view than its comparably bland predecessor, with a distinct visor on the back, coloured power button, two-tone finish on this white model, and a taller, rounder display with skinnier chin and forehead. These now house the front-firing speakers that many fans and critics lamented the original Pixel for dropping right after the Nexus 6P. Google gave the 2 XL a squeeze for assistant feature, which was now possible thanks to the pressure sensors found in the sides of the chassis. This is something that didn't last too long before being cut in later releases, but was a novel and fun way to launch the virtual hub of your device. There were general improvements across the board. Battery life was better, there was now IP67 water and dust resistance where there hadn't been any before, and the Snapdragon 835 and 4GB of RAM improved the already very solid performance, and the software had improved too, with Google Lens creating foundations for the image recognition that we now see in stuff like Google Gemini, where you can just point your phone at pretty much anything and get information about it. But despite all these positives and the fact that for many, this phone is still the coolest Pixel of them all, it wasn't without its controversies. The chief among which being the LG supplied OLED display had a reputation for being a little off. Its colour shift off-axis was poor, resulting in some strange colours if you viewed your phone at any other than directly straight on. I'd say a lot of what was said about this display at the time was a bit exaggerated. It certainly wasn't the worst screen, even at the time, and using it now, it doesn't offend with its viewing angles, despite the fact that we're used to some incredible OLED panels in 2024. And though not quite as much noise was made about this, the fact that Google made fun of the headphone port being removed just the year before and then launched a phone without one was a bold move to say the least. A lot of people, including myself, found that to be a pretty dumb one, as the headphone port was still relevant at the time and Google even included a USB-C to headphone port adapter to compensate from the lack of ports. The stereo front-firing speakers, which I guess Google thought would be a worthy compromise when removing the headphone port, were a marked improvement over the original Pixel and almost justified the chin and forehead, though screen tech at this point wasn't at the level to be able to really push the edges right up to the corners of the chassis. The speakers were half decent with a nice amount of bass present, and being front firing, they're a lot clearer and crisper than if they're facing away from you like in the bottom of the device. Even the rear facing capacitive fingerprint scanner is one of those things that Pixel 2 XL stands, like myself, miss in the current crop of devices. Look, in-display scanners are cool, they're futuristic, but they're also largely not as quick or reliable as this. The 2 and the 2 XL launched with Android 8 Oreo, and over the course of its life actually did receive 3 major upgrades, so this is now running Android 11, where it has remained officially ever since. That's not quite the level of software support that we expect these days for such an expensive phone, but it's a sign of the times, as this was pretty respectable back in 2017. It adopted features like now playing on the always-on display, which helped the phone feel newer than it really was. If you're handy with flashing your own ROMs, then in 2024 you can actually get Android 14 on here via third-party software like Lineage OS, if you know you know. Though I'm not sure just how well it would run given the limited RAM, about half of what we have these days, and the 7-year-old SoC. Not to mention the seemingly puny 64GB of storage that I'm sure many Android enthusiasts could fill up in mere minutes. And remember, no Pixel has a microSD card slot, so you couldn't even expand your storage that way, even if you wanted to. But as was the case with the debut Pixel and then every generation since, The headline feature of the 2XL was its camera system. It's funny to look at the on-paper specs, as not only does it only have one camera on the front and one camera on the back, compared to the suite of sensors we're used to seeing these days, but that main rear camera sensor is functionally the same as 4 of the other Pixel generations from the 1st to the 5th. Alright, the first one lacked OIS, making its usable sensor size a smidge larger, but Google loves to reuse its camera sensors. That said, the 2XL still took the crown back in 2017 for having the best camera on any smartphone. Or at least was the camera able to capture the best images thanks to Google's HDR+ processing pipeline that was still quite novel and has since become widespread in its concept, as the smaller smartphone camera sensors really needed that shove in the software to capture good dynamic range and low light performance. This camera sensor is less than half the size of what we're used to these days. Alright, so portrait mode wasn't incredible, and actually many outlets put this down to the Pixel 2 and 2XL not having a second depth sensor, which feels kind of crazy now that we say it out loud, but it did a solid job in my opinion and wasn't nearly as predictable or as reliable as the modern ones, but not bad for 2017. The 2 tiny sensors on offer here produce remarkably good images despite their size, and that was all down to the processing, which is what Google's been known for since. Even taking photos today, they come out pretty decent. The main things you might notice is the lack of crazy dynamic range that almost all phones capture today, and funnily enough, the fact that you can't zoom in or zoom out with a big ultrawide or a big telephoto. You just have to use your legs to get further back or closer to the subject, which I know of course doesn't replicate the optical characteristics of actually changing the lens, but that's all you got, so you gotta live with it. There have been heaps of great phones over the years, and Google has made its fair share too, with these devices almost gaining cult followings online. The first one crashed onto the scene with its own take on what the smartphone should be. The third one brought a bathtub notch with 2 selfie cameras and a glass back with wireless charging. We don't talk about that 5th one. And the 6th one introduced us to a new era of Pixel with hardware that took a substantial leap. Heck, even the 8 and the 8 Pro could really be seen as some of the best Pixels, as they were results of years of hardware and software refinement. Also, they came in some cool colours, so that's also a bonus. But despite all of these things, what makes the 2XL so great and why I consider it to be the GOAT of Pixels is just the way it makes you feel when you use it. It felt like the future back in the day. It was the phone that you took out of your pocket just to look at it, not actually to turn it on. And even now in 2024, the 2XL looks and feels unique. It's a wonderful piece of design with a camera that wowed the world. I hope we see another Pixel like it. One that could go on to be a classic, just like the 2XL. Go on Google, make a worthy follow-up to the GOAT. Which Pixel was your favourite, ladies and gents? I have to say I do have a bit of a soft spot for the Pixel 5, as much as that wasn't a mad phone. I just love the shape and the size of it, but for me the 2XL will always be the GOAT. Let me know what you reckon in the comments, and while you're down there, hit like if you enjoyed today's content and subscribe to never miss another upload. I've been Ryan Thomas, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.